Welcome to today's webinar. This is the final part in my Evolving Your Remote Workforce series. Today's session is why it's time to rethink your cloud migration strategy. My name's Andrew Rigg. I'm a solutions architect at Perfect Image, and my focus is around public cloud, specifically Microsoft Azure, AWS, and Microsoft 365. Perfect Image is a managed service provider located in the northeast of the UK. We're a consultancy-led business with over 90 IT professionals across 3 business units, covering business intelligence, business systems, and IT infrastructure. Today we'll cover, why public cloud? So business continuity emerged as a top priority for many organizations from the start of the year, even before the effects of COVID were felt. The need for robust plans, to ensure operations continue, no matter what the situation is, has never been more critical, considering the impact and the changes from office-based workforce to remote workforce in recent times. How to create a cloud migration strategy. So this will chew up most of our time today. In the webinar, I'll break this down into sections, including define, plan, build, ready, adopt, govern, and manage. And how aggressive are your timeframes? It's not only the current environment we find ourselves in for the reason to reassess our timelines, but we also need to consider the costs associated with delayed or extended migrations. Not all cloud migrations are quick. They can take years, but it's important to have this planned and understand the costs associated with an extending migration. When choosing your public cloud provider, we have a few considerations. AWS and Azure are the go-to providers, but we also have GCP, Google Cloud Platform. But GCP is by no ways as mature as the previous two. So they really won't get a mention throughout this presentation. So AWS and Azure, they're currently the main 2 providers. That should be considered when building a migration strategy. And then understanding your cloud costs. If you don't understand what cloud resources you have, then how can you evaluate how much you should be paying? This is where governance for policies, tagging, landing zones, blueprints, and other organizations should be utilized. And then optimizing your cloud. Don't spend a penny more than you need to. One of the biggest benefits of public cloud is paying for the pay-as-you-go, so pay-as-you-consume model. But it's all too familiar to hear stories where organizations' cloud costs are getting out of control. Both AWS and Azure don't want you paying more than you require. It's a risk to them that you may move your workloads to another provider or stop deploying new workloads and kind of stall a cloud migration. This is why they both natively provide cost management options, and billing alerts, and they allow the third parties products to build integrations into their billing APIs. A more cynical engineer or private cloud provider may tell you, public cloud is just someone else's computer on the internet. While that's true to a degree, it's the technology layered upon this is what makes public cloud offerings so compelling. So there's many reasons why you should use AWS or Azure, as your public cloud provider. I'll cover my top 8 reasons. So starting with agility, expand your current environment into the cloud. Do you have resource constraints for compute, storage, or seasonal demands? The ability to have an environment automatically scale when your users or customers require it. Don't pay for idle resources. So consolidate physically separated systems into a logical public cloud estate, while maintaining geographic data locations for compliance. No more hardware, life cycles, or no need to scope and future-proof those data center refreshes. So acquisitions and short-term contracts. The timeline for procuring and deploying infrastructure changes from weeks or months, to days or hours once you're in public cloud. Intensive workloads. So bid for cheap compute. So non-time sensitive processes can be queued and run when cheaper compute power becomes available, including nightly reports. The flexibility to change server types. So change from general purpose VMs, to CPU, RAM, or GPU optimized instances. Change as you need. Backup and disaster recovery. So advanced disaster recovery solutions can be achieved at a fraction of the cost. Where once it was cost prohibited if you tried to implement these solutions in your own data centers. You can use products like Cloud Endure and Azure Site Recovery for either on-prem or cloud-to-cloud workloads, and replicate them to a second region to prevent, the risks around a region outage. And this allows you to have reduced recovery time objectives. Then we go into cost reductions. So you've got multiple choices on how the workloads are consumed and built in public cloud. They start with the on-demand instances. So you pay as you go. You pay for the instances you launch, and you pay for it when you use it. It gives you the most flexibility, but you pay the most for this if you're running those instances 24/7. Then we go down to reserved instances. So you reduce your costs by making the commitment to those consistent resources. Terms start with a 1-year commitment, and monthly payment options are available as well. Then you move to spot instances. So these are the ones where you bid for those unused server instances within the cloud provider. So these can reduce costs significantly, but you have to, those workloads have to be able to stop and start at any time of day. Then you get to dedicated hosts. Effectively, you're renting the entire physical host. So it's dedicated to you and running your workloads. You can also, with these ones, you can also bring your existing per socket, per core, per VM licensing to further reduce your costs. Then we get into facilities and kind of real estate. So if you're running in the public cloud, then you haven't got those issues when you're looking to move premises. Once you're in the cloud, you can move office with very limited changes required. And then we get down to information security. So people often perceive cloud as being insecure. However, in public cloud, public cloud data is encrypted at rest, it's in transit, and infrastructure is behind enterprise class systems and firewalls, even for the smallest of deployments. Data sovereignty, so deploy in the region where your data needs to reside. Microsoft alone, right, they invest over £1 billion each year into security for their platform and offerings. So some common challenges businesses face and reasons for developing a cloud migration strategy are as follows. So legacy applications and migration risks and the challenges associated, years of intertwined and disparate systems, older hardware and server room facilities, is a refresh of the hardware due or current capacity issues, and you have no budget or desire to upgrade mid-cycle. Local resource constraints due to legacy, distributed data center designs, the typical growing pains and stopgap solutions that were implemented without that detailed plan, or simply reacting to data growth. Slow responses, to business requirements. It can take weeks or months to provision new resources, even if it is a simple virtual server, as you may have to provision the additional hardware to first meet those requirements. And then the lack of robust disaster recovery capabilities. Disaster recoveries can be expensive if you do it yourself, especially if you have those very low recovery point and recovery time objectives. So in the next 15 to 20 minutes, we'll cover off creating your migration strategy. So when we break down the cloud migration strategy, this helps us understand what the migration involves. We need to define your strategy, build your business case, plan your migration. Look at your team's strengths and technical expertise. Migrate in phases. It took Netflix close to 8 years to move from on-prem to cloud. Whilst doing this allowed them to evolve, their offering to their customer. Then we move to ready, adapt, govern, manage, and last, but not least, is underpinning all this is the communication. You should not forget your employees when producing a migration strategy. Documenting your cloud strategy helps stakeholders understand the business outcomes that the organization is pursuing by adopting the cloud. Define and document your motivations. Meet with those key stakeholders and document the motivations behind cloud adoption. Document business outcomes. Engage those stakeholders to document those specific business outcomes. Develop the business case to validate the financial model that supports your motivations and outcomes. Your first adoption project will help align those motivations with technical effort. We'll look a little deeper into each of these points in the next few slides. So up on screen are the critical business events, migration triggers, and innovations to consider when moving to public cloud. When engaging stakeholders across the business and discussing technology, it's important that everyone understands the benefits and motivations for your cloud adoption. When engaging different stakeholders, document those desired outcomes across these categories. Now, a perfect image would typically run a workshop with you, but we also have various templates and documents to help you capture the right information and help identify your business outcomes. General questions and topics that are covered are, what do you expect from your move to the cloud? What are you moving to the cloud? What are you moving short, medium, and long term? Have you thought about using a multi-cloud strategy? And what are the risks you have identified? And what applications and databases have you identified to move to the cloud, especially for a phase one? So as we move to developing, the business justifications, these are just some of the common myths that are always brought up by somebody, right? And they need to be discussed and understood. A lot of these are around costs. Cloud is cheaper. Costs are a driver for a migration. OpEx versus CapEx. But costs should not be the driver or the focus for cloud. One of the main benefits for cloud is the agility and innovation that comes with agility. Don't simply lift and shift your workloads. Yes, you'll have benefits for doing this, but doing this alone will probably cost you more. And if cost reductions were a driver for your adoptions, and if you haven't continued to optimize and assess your environment and innovate by using cloud native resources, then you will not see the benefits from moving to public cloud. Then there's the security question, right? But I'll need 45 minutes or more alone, just to talk about this. But saying public cloud is not secure is simply not true. I would argue the opposite. The controls that are available to you, are all enterprise level, and where you could simply not afford these, afford to implement these on-prem if you're doing this yourself, unless you may have been a FTSE 500. But then I'll still argue that cloud has the edge. So when creating your first migration project, use clearly defined criteria and clearly identified outcomes that you want to achieve. It should be aligned with your motivations for cloud adoption. Use the project as a source of learning. Typical examples of initial projects tend to be around backup and disaster recovery. When using Azure Site Recovery as a disaster recovery tool, reducing those dependencies on disaster recovery assets within a secondary data center. AWS has Cloud Endure for this, and this can also be used as a quick lift and shift to get your workloads to the cloud. So start with those non-critical workloads, or if developing new applications and workloads, then use a fail fast, learn faster approach. So part of the cloud migration strategy is to create your business case. This provides answers to those common questions that get asked. If you just happen to start using the cloud, and prevents some of those awkward questions. Like, why are we getting these bills from AWS or Microsoft? What workloads do we have running? Who approved this? It's actually quite common for companies to be in the cloud using public cloud resources and running critical business workloads before the business asks, what's that cloud migration strategy? Building a business case provides the answers to the questions on screen now, and these feeds into your overall cloud strategy. So there's two types. There's two main types of business cases. So you've got directional and you've got detailed. Directional is commonly used for budgetary purposes. But so this would provide cost within a 20% kind of plus minus of those final costs. Now, depending on the size of your workloads, This could add or reduce your cloud costs by tens of thousands per month. So directional is a good starting point, but it will often move on to a detailed business case before any workloads are migrated. Iterate the business case. Don't go for perfection first pass. Excuse me. So along with directional and detailed, you also have the different approaches and tools associated with these to gather the information to support the business case. So these are manual and the automated approach. So the manual discovery typically involves a total cost of ownership calculator with assumptions, migration cost estimators, business value and financial analysis. Also, you utilize the 6 R's for a higher level assessment of the workloads and applications. So more detail on what the 6 R's are in a later slide. The manual process works fine for smaller workloads, of under 50 servers, but anything more than the automated approach should be used, and the tooling should be utilized. Both AWS and Microsoft provide free tools as part of their migration hubs. AWS use TSO Logic, and Microsoft has Microsoft Azure. Microsoft Azure Migrate. There's also plenty of other third-party products available, but it'll depend upon the size of your estate and the detail you required if these third-party tools are required. As you start to use the automated tooling, you now get the ability to start assessing the current workloads of the and resource requirements for those applications, and you start to build out application dependencies to produce migration and to produce and plan migration groups. When assessing the current individual server workloads, this tooling does the cost analysis and recommendations for the instance sizes for when they're cloud servers. So an example of this, if a VM is allocated 8 CPU, 64 gig of RAM, but only utilizing between 25 to 50%, in public cloud, you would allocate 4 cores and 32 gig RAM. Why would you pay for something you're not using? If you do have peaks in your workloads, then either adding auto scaling or scheduling extra resources are other ways to optimize your spend. Doing the analysis, using third-party or cloud vendor supplied tools gives us the ability to factor these costs into our business case. Right, so during the discovery phase, we need to look at all the costs associated with moving to public cloud. It's not just the infrastructure, or hosting costs. It's about assessing the application, the migration, people, but then also third-party costs. So I've been asked, why not just complete a total cost of ownership, a TCO? Why would we complete a business case? Well, the TCO focuses on a small period of time, the time immediately after you go live with your cloud workloads. Before you reach the predicted TCO costs, you have the migration bubble. But so during the business case, you must make it clear that there will be a period of increased costs before you reach those TCO costs. It's important not to extend your migration timeframes during the project beyond what it was planned, unless there are very critical reasons for doing this. The longer the migration, the bigger that migration bubble, and the more the costs will be felt. This will then push out the kind of TCO timelines and push back the payback period. So that the migration bubble costs consists of planning and assessments, duplicate environments, staff training, migration consultancy, third-party tooling, and also lease penalties. So next you come to the TCO phase. Your monthly costs should now be at that predicted spend. After this, then comes back that payback period. But this will depend upon that length of that migration bubble. But you should simply not just stop once you're in the cloud. Cost optimization should continue, and the more that your workloads evolve, and the more you go cloud native, then your cloud spend will also reduce. More ways on optimizing your cloud spend a bit later. So up on screen are the reasons, kind of why you should complete a business case and not just a TCO. A business case assessment can take as little as a few hours, but it can go for as long as 10 weeks. The timeframes are subject to having the right access and data available. So when looking at compute capacity, typical data centers are only consuming about 45% of their capacity. When assessing the individual workloads, it's not uncommon to find that the individual resources are over-provisioned by more than 50%, partly because it's available, but also because assessing on-premise workloads after the fact is rarely done. When you complete your design and capacity planning for on-premise dates, you have to plan for your workload types and estimate your growth and plan for this at the point of purchase. Why not just add capacity later? Well, to start with, you generally won't have the provision for this in your budget. You could be talking hundreds of thousands of pounds alone for more storage. Just like buying a car, if you try to build a car with parts, you'll pay more, much more after the initial purchase than if you added at that point of sale. With IT hardware, that's down to the power of purchasing, right? And your power of choice. You can choose your vendor and get the best price. Once purchased, you must now expand with their parts, and also the parts may be in short supply due to the age. When you compare this to public cloud, when you only pay for the virtual machine, the storage, and the network consumed, when you're using that service, you no longer have to have those capacity planning. Leave that to those cloud providers for that. So what are the 6 R's, right? So I'll talk you through these and discuss how these are assessed. So you got retained, first of all. So workloads are kept, where they are. They may not be suitable for cloud. Retire, fairly straightforward. Retire the workloads from use. Then you've got rehost. So this is where you will just do a simple lift and shift. You move from where you are with what service you have to the cloud provider. Replatform. So this is a lift and shift with a bit of a jiggle, right? So you might update the OS or move SQL off to RDS or Azure SQL. Then you get refactor. So this is when you're going to move to more cloud native services. Your applications will need to be modified or rewritten. And then you get repurchase. If you have Sage 50, Sage 200, you might move to their SaaS offering. Or if you have on-prem Exchange, you move to Exchange Online and Office 365. So what's the common percentage, the percentages of these at the initial migration stage? We see about 10% being retained, 5% retired, 40% just being rehosted as that lift and shift, 30% for replatform, 5% for refactoring, and again, 10% for the repurchase. So your largest chunk is that rehost and replatform. Now, remember, this is at that initial migration stage. So the optimization kind of happens later to this. So now we move into the planning phase. So the cloud adoption plan converts the aspirational goals of the cloud adoption strategy into actions. It helps guide the technical efforts required and is also aligned to the business strategy. Again, on the screen are the 4 key areas, and the next couple of slides will go into more details on each again. So rationalize your digital estate. Cloud rationalization is the process of evaluating those assets, determining the best approach to hosting them in the cloud, or taking a hybrid approach. When assessing those workloads, we use the 6 R's for each application or workload. Rationalization can take place using an incremental approach, where the cloud strategy team selects those first applications to be migrated, and they select a mix of simple and complex workloads, as this is the recommended approach. By adding those complex workloads, you ensure you've not missed anything for during those assessments, proof of concepts, and proof of technology stages. The output is a prioritized list of all assets, physical and virtual, that are affected by the chosen transformation. Use the costing models from your chosen cloud provider, to forecast those costs for those prioritized workloads. Remember, always ensure that the hybrid approach is incorporated into those cost modelings. So anything that is going to retain on-prem. So you also need to consider those types of workloads right in line with the 6 R's. So if you're rehosting or replatforming, then these will kind of fall into the existing workloads category. Refactor and repurchase to a degree falls into the new workloads categories. All these costs need to be evaluated. So involve the entire business, not just IT. Delivering a successful cloud strategy depends upon depends also on the users and the customer experience. Cloud adoption will impact everyone within the organization. They need to be prepared to contribute, to the overall strategy and ensure the success of the adoption, and also look for ways to use the new cloud features to benefit their specific functional area. Business and IT should be equal partners in defining that cloud strategy. Cloud has an impact on all other areas of the organization, not just IT, and they should be driving the cloud strategy as well. Create the balance between speed, moving quickly, and control, or reducing risks, by having the teams accountable for adoption and governance. While the cloud adoption team are required to execute the cloud adoption tasks, the government teams ensures the processes and controls are implemented. Depending upon the size of your organization and teams, it's not uncommon for one or more members to overlap into both teams. So cloud computing is a technology shift, and a new set of skills are required to support the cloud solutions. There can be pushback from IT personnel, who are from a traditional data center or on-prem hardware estates, to feel concerned or worried they won't have a job if you move to the cloud. That's far from the truth. Just because it's in the cloud doesn't mean that it's all managed by the cloud provider. You must work with the shared responsibility model. If you don't have the internal teams or current teams, or if they don't have the right skill sets now, then this is when you can engage a partner as an incubator. And throughout the migration and into the support stage, training plans are developed. This will enable your business to be self-sufficient, or focus on the applications and continue to outsource the day-to-day management. So, an exit strategy. An exit strategy, outlines the considerations regarding extracting yourself from a cloud provider if you need to. While it's rare to move from the cloud back to a traditional data center hosting, the possibility needs to be considered. Some regulators even mandate an exit strategy. The exit strategy per cloud service will differ, but moving from IaaS to IaaS workloads is thankfully more simple. And Azure and AWS already have this documented for the migration processes, and this can form part of your can form part of your exit strategy. You may want to move all or part of your estate from one cloud provider to another. As best practice, you should have an exit strategy for everything you do. If you have contingency plans for those unseen events, right? So these include events affecting your cloud provider, if they have a total outage or a total loss of data. During the cloud strategy planning, developing a multi-cloud strategy, even if this is for disaster recovery, can also play into your exit strategy. So translate strategy and effort into an actionable cloud adoption plan. When developing the cloud adoption plan, ask yourself, how are you organizing your people and teams for the cloud transformation? Where does the accountability reside for application creation and availability? What are the current skill gaps? How do you train your people and skill them up? And also, what's the prioritized list of applications you're moving to the cloud? Governance models that are designed with the vision, of reaching a state that incrementally builds on trust and confidence while achieving your business goals. Whether you start with an enterprise scale or whether you start small and expand expand your landing zones, you should follow these 5 disciplines of governance. Governance, they've got the 5 kind of actionable disciplines that enable your organization to modernize and reach business goals. So they're cost management, security baseline, resource consistency and management, identity baseline, and deployment acceleration. Corporate governance policies are formulated to detect potential problems. It enables the creation of a balance between transformation, so evolving your business with digital transformation, and risk mitigation, so minimizing risks to business outcomes and performance. Change is more than adopting technology. It's adapting how you do business. Developing a cloud migration strategy allows us to align the business, the people, and the technology strategy to achieve business goals with actionable, efficient, and use partner guidance also to deliver fast results with control and stability. Both AWS and Azure have their native cost management, and right sizing recommendations built into their portals, that provide the cost breakdown at a resource level. But if you're after a more detailed breakdown, and the ability to report on costs via department, resource types, and other tags, you may then need to utilize another third-party service that collects and analyzes data and integrates into the Azure and AWS APIs. Products such as Cloud Checker and Cloud Wisdom are examples of products that can help achieve this. Just like cost management portals, both AWS and Azure have the ability for policies, to allow cloud spend to be kept in check. First by limiting what services can be deployed. Before these policies are created or proposed, you kind of need to answer a few questions. Based upon these, the policies then can be developed in line with your governance and kind of cloud teams to ensure the right balance is met. So who's responsible for your cloud budget? What are you going to allow? Are you going to allow all the use of any service, any resource, any region? What's your policies around budget overrun? Will there be different policies for spend based upon internal use or a potential impact to the customer environment? So here's my wrap up and key takeaways from this session. So create a cloud migration strategy. It's not too late. Define, plan, build, adopt, govern, manage, and most of all, communicate. Assess your cloud providers. Who you choose may not be your cloud provider in the next 3 to 5 years. Build an exit strategy into your cloud migration strategy. Manage, monitor, and deliver expected outcomes. Ensure the cloud environment is secure, compliant, and in line with your governance model. For optimize, don't stop at a lift and shift. Understand your control. Understand and control your cloud costs. And then repeat. Once you've created the cloud migration strategy, that's not the end of it. Evolve, iterate, and communicate. So Perfect Image is offering incentives and free consultations to customers to help develop their remote workforce, the cloud business strategy, really anything that kind of falls under this Evolving Your Remote Workforce series. If your business is experiencing those challenges or pains, then please get in touch. We're offering those free consultations to UK businesses at the moment. We'll have a chat about the issues you're facing, and what you want to achieve and help you fulfill your goal. So I hope today's webinars give you some insights into creating a cloud migration strategy and how you can prepare. This session will be available on demand along with the parts 1 to 5. This was the last webinar within this series, but there are plans for more in the future. So I'll check for any questions before I wrap up. Okay, just a couple here. So I don't know where to start. So we're using cloud services, but I don't know why we have chosen the current provider or what our real strategy is. So to answer this one, right, so for this, we would need to know further information. But what we'll do is we'll contact you after this, and set up a session to understand your current workloads and understand what your objectives are. It isn't too late to build that cloud migration strategy, and it should always be reviewed, updated, and challenged, to ensure you're achieving your business goals. As public cloud offerings, develop and evolve, at a rapid rate, what you implement now may change in the next 24 to 48 months. So another one here is our Azure billing is via a cloud service provider and the cost management is not available to us. Is there another way to view this? So if they're not providing you a breakdown of what the costs are, either from Azure or with another third-party product, then you've got a right there to be concerned. Viewing the costs and resources in Azure billed via CSP, so cloud service provider, it's always been an issue. The good news is Microsoft has introduced Azure Plan now for CSPs. So with a small bit of configuration in their portals, the RRP costs can now be made visible to you as the end customer. I think this is the final one. So I'm a heavy Microsoft user, and all the servers are Windows based. Should I only consider Azure, or is AWS an option? So I'll say no to this, right? So Azure isn't your only other option here. And just because your workloads are Windows based, right? So in fact, AWS have more Windows workloads running in AWS than Microsoft do in Azure. And they also offer heavy kind of incentives and promotions, right, to move Windows workloads onto AWS, but then also more to move from Windows to cloud native. What needs to be done is look at your objectives. If your goal is to consume all 365 services and decommission all servers, eventually, right? So, but you need to lift and shift out of your current data center. Then if you've got the likes of 2008 server workloads or SQL, then we may push you more to Azure there because you get free support. But again, more of a conversation will be required. Okay, I think that is it. So once again, thank you very much.